I never planned to be the villain's best friend. Back then, she wasn't a villain. Back then, she was the light in every room, the woman who walked into hunger and made it look like it could be solved with a clipboard and a kind pair of eyes. Her name was Vanessa Hale, and she had this way of looking at you that felt like sunlight through clean glass. You'd hand her your trust before you even realized you were holding it. And me, I was the person standing half a step behind her, whispering details into her ear. Names, figures, quotes for the camera. I was her communications director, her late-night confidant, her emergency coffee runner, and the steady pair of hands that never trembled when the red light on the camera blinked on. I loved her the way a little sister loves the older sister who finally came home from college with a suitcase full of adult answers. I loved what we did too. We fed people. We kept shelters open through winters that should have broken their backs. The city learned her name because when Vanessa said she'd be there, she was there. With trucks and nurses and the odd minor celebrity she could coax out of a donor dinner with a wink and a text. Impact isn't a number, she'd say. It's a person. One person who sleeps inside tonight, who would have slept on a bench if we hadn't shown up. And maybe that's why it took me so long to see the holes. The first hole was small, a receipt stuffed into the glove box of her driver's SUV. A dress store uptown that doesn't even put prices on their mannequins, just whispers them like secrets. I found it when I reached in for my spare phone charger, rain hammering the roof of the car, Vanessa beside me on speaker saying, "Tell Channel 9. We'll be 5 minutes late, but we will be there." The total on the receipt was more than I'd paid for my last semester of college. I put it back quickly, as if I'd peeked at something intimate. I told myself that wealthy donors buy wealthy things, that she had a private life I wasn't privy to, that the dress was a borrowed sample, that the charge was someone else's flourish on a card with her name. I told myself these things because the alternative, that our halo had a seam, was unthinkable. The second hole wasn't a hole. It was a crater dressed as a gala. You know the kind. Crystal stemware, ice sculpture, a stage built like a promise, soft lights, a string quartet bending sorrow into something palatable. We raised $2 million in one evening to adopt a block of vacant buildings and convert them into transitional housing. I wrote that line. Adopt a block. Clever. Touchable. People laughed into their champagne at the idea of adopting real estate the way you adopt a puppy. Vanessa read my copy and kissed my forehead. "You're brilliant, Mara," she whispered. "We're going to do this." By midnight, my feet ached and my phone hummed with recordings from local news. At 12:17 a.m., I watched Vanessa slip outside with a man I'd seen before. Silver hair, smile like a Sunday sin, donor level, platinum. They stood under the portico as snow began to drift, his hand covering hers the way men cover fires to keep them from going out. I didn't follow. I went into the kitchen where the staff were rolling linens and scraping plates. I thanked them, the women who kept the world moving in the shadows, then went back into the ballroom and put my fingers on the model of the block, the tiny windows we were going to fill with heat and life. I smiled at the thought of it, the heat part. That's what we promised in winter, what all good charities promise, warmth. The next morning, the invoice approvals landed in my inbox, a courtesy since the communications team signed off on anything that would become a story. We were paying a design consultancy 6 figures for architectural renderings. I clicked the website in the invoice. It didn't load. I copied the address into a search bar. No results. My stomach dropped. That subtle free fall you get when an elevator starts down before you're ready. I wrote to our finance director, Simone. I asked if she'd seen this name before. Simone sent me a thumbs up emoji. I stared at it for a long, long time. A week later, my mother called to tell me the pipes at her apartment had failed. She works nights at a hospital, cleaning floors that always seem to bleed into morning. She is 63, smoke thin, eyes the same quiet gray as mine. I hate to ask, she said, but it's $1,000 to fix it, and they want it up front. I told her I'd send it, and I did. Then I walked into Vanessa's office without knocking. Sometimes we did that, the two of us. We were walk in without knocking people. She was barefoot on the couch, feet tucked under her, laptop on a tray, AirPods in. She pulled one out. What's on fire? I need 1,000, I said. She lifted a brow. For my mother. Pipes. She won't take it from me if I say it's mine. If it came from the emergency housing fund with a kind note from you. Done. She didn't blink. She didn't ask for paperwork. She didn't ask for proof. She angled her screen toward me, typed a few lines, then stopped and glanced up. What name? Paula Rivera. I spelled it. This is how easy you can ask for help when you think you're standing inside a miracle that keeps giving. She hit send. Tell her people care, Vanessa said. Tell her it's all going to be okay. It wasn't until that night, brushing my teeth, that the incongruity reached me. We had process, we had forms, we vetted every request because for every true need, there were a dozen clever scams. And we were vigilant because that's what stewardship is. But with me, she'd skipped all of it. I spat toothpaste and told myself she did it because she loved me, because it was quicker, because we were us. That's the thing about trust. The edges erode unseen. I grew up in a neighborhood that believed in casseroles and borrowed sugar. When babies were born, doors opened. When someone died, foil-covered dishes appeared like flowers after rain. That's the love I carried into this work. The belief that people are complicated, but goodness is simple and generous. That story can be a bridge. That transparency is just honesty with receipts. I treated Vanessa like a bridge and forgot that sometimes bridges hide what's below. Vanessa moved through the city like a hymn. She took selfies with kids in the after-school program, crown of curls pressed to her jaw. She clasped the hands of exhausted men who'd slept upright in a waiting room just to secure a spot in a winter shelter. She had a way of listening with her whole face that made people say too much. She had a way of thanking you that made you laugh. Stop, you'd say. You make it sound like I cured something. And then you'd go home and tell 3 more people. And those 3 would tell 3 more. And that's how movements are built, in whispers and crowded kitchens and late-night texts where hope feels like a dare. I was proud of it, proud of her, proud of the shows we put on, though I never used the word show because we bristled at theater. We believed we were the thing itself, not the performance. The reporters started calling in spring. Not the usual ones, the smiling women with hair that never frizzed no matter how hard it rained, the men with lapel mics and handsome empathy, but investigative reporters with voices like door hinges. We're doing a deep dive into local nonprofit accountability, one said, And I put him off with a packet of audited statements and crisp one-liners about our 91% program allocation. We'd love to see a detailed breakdown of your administrative vendors, another said, and I pointed him to the public 990 and wished him well, even as a piece of me stayed on the line, listening to the silence that followed. Simone, in finance, started tense laughing at nothing. Audit season, she said when I asked. I haven't slept since February. I brought her coffee with extra espresso and her favorite almond croissants. She smiled and didn't eat it. I began to think about that first receipt in the car. I began to think about the design firm that wasn't a firm. So I did something that makes me ashamed and relieved in equal measure. I snooped. Technically, I didn't need to. Our internal documents were accessible to leadership, and I had the keys everyone assumes the quiet, competent women already have. But the act felt like trespassing anyway, like I was picking a lock I'd helped install. I searched for that design firm again. I pulled every invoice we'd paid them in 18 months. The total was enough to choke me. The shell company had a P.O. box downtown and no phone number. The registered agent, according to the Secretary of State's website, was an elderly woman in Florida who had died 8 months before the company existed. I printed the filings and tucked them into my tote. I kept my face smooth when I walked past desks pressed with plants and sticky notes. I smiled when volunteers waved from the lobby, teenagers wearing our purple shirts over mismatched leggings and shorts. In Vanessa's office, the sunlight made everything gentler. We'd done that on purpose. Our space was designed to remind anyone who came in that they were safe. Windows and plants, couches that didn't demand posture, soft lamps, something baking in the staff kitchen that made even hard conversations smell like welcome. She gestured for me to sit. You look like you swallowed a stapler. I found some invoices, I began. My voice was too light. The design firm for the housing block, they're not real. She blinked behind lashes that always made me think of movie scenes where the heroine looks down and the whole theater leans in. What do you mean? They don't have a visible office. The registration is peculiar. The agent is dead. Vanessa laughed softly. Welcome to real estate. Everyone wears someone else's coat. She slid a folder toward me. They're a subcontractor for a larger firm. Sometimes the subs are just pass-throughs. Boring, dumb, legal. The fun is in the last-minute permits and the cesspools under the floor that you don't discover until you smell them. I just wanted to ask. And I love that about you. She beamed. You always do. Keep me honest, Mara. Please, don't ever stop. It should have calmed me. It almost did. Then I asked a question I still can't believe I asked. What about the dress? Silence. A half beat too long. What dress? In the car, the receipt. Her eyes darkened for a second, like a room when a cloud crosses. A donor gift, she said lightly. Didn't fit. I returned it. I nodded. I rotated the pen in my fingers 3 times. 4, the way I do when I'm chewing on doubt. Okay. She watched me. If someone starts sniffing around, send them to me. This is a good thing we're doing. We cannot let petty jealousies and rumor sniffers derail the block. Her mouth softened. And please don't bring me problems without bringing me solutions. You're too smart to set fires without water in your pocket. I left her office with both of us smiling. Only one of us believed it. The phone calls kept coming. Some I deflected, some I scheduled. We were used to scrutiny, but this felt different. Orthodontic? Precise? How do you ensure your vendor selection avoids conflicts of interest? Who controls the donor advised funds that route money through your foundation? What internal checks exist on your CEO's discretionary expenses? That last one made me dizzy. She doesn't have discretionary expenses, I said. She approves program emergencies. She doesn't misuse funds, I said it, because it was supposed to be true. The first published article wasn't about us. It fitted a pattern into the city's mouth, spelled out how charities can hide business interests inside independent vendors, how foundations can become conduits for private gain. We were mentioned in the 10th paragraph as a model for transparency. I exhaled so hard it hurt. Vanessa came to my desk and squeezed my shoulder. See? You worry for sport. 2 days later, Simone didn't show up for work. At noon, I drove to her apartment, a walk-up with lavender-painted stairs and a front gate that shrieked. Her mailbox overflowed with coupons. I knocked until my knuckles smarted, and when she didn't answer, I drove to the coffee shop she liked and watched the door like a dog left in a car. At 3, she texted, "I'm okay. I need a day." "Is something wrong?" I wrote back. "Yes." "Do you need me?" Number. I stared at that word and began to cry in my car, in a spot with a 2-hour limit, meter blinking red. A shameful private cry that embarrassed me because it felt so loud. Sometimes sorrow is soft, sometimes it clangs like dropped cookware. Simone came back at 9 the next morning. She walked to her office like a person who had spent the night learning a language no one else spoke. I followed, closed the door behind me, sat. I didn't speak. She did, finally, to the window. I've been asking for purchase orders before approvals, and I'm not getting them. For who? She named the design firm. She named 2 event companies we'd used for donor dinners. She named a consulting group that never seemed to consult. I asked for the underlying contracts and got a bracing lecture about innovation in the nonprofit sector. I asked Vanessa for a pause on payments, and she said, quote, "Don't be small-minded." I stared at the floor. What do we do? Laid out clean, this is embezzlement. The word landed between us with a thud. But it's smart. It's clean paper. It's plausible. If you don't want to see it, you don't. I put my hands over my face. I can't breathe. Simone exhaled slowly. We need a board meeting. The board. Our donors' darlings, our elder stateswomen and men. People with names on hospitals who loved the way Vanessa made charity feel like a startup with perfect metrics. A place where you could buy a unit of good, like you buy a share of a future. People who cried prettily when we played videos at breakfast meetings. People who texted Vanessa late at night, not with questions, but with hearts. We called an emergency session for Friday. By Thursday afternoon, a reporter called me with a voice that said, she already knew the ending. We've obtained documents that show payments to companies owned by your CEO's holding company. Would you like to make a statement before we publish? I played dumb for 2 minutes because I needed 2 minutes to rearrange the furniture in my head. Then I said, we are investigating any and all claims with utmost seriousness. I'll get back to you. My hand shook so hard, I had to put the phone flat on my desk. Vanessa's door was open. I went in. For a heartbeat, I saw her as a stranger would. The framed photos taken in places where suffering photographs well, floods, fires, school gyms filled with cots, and in every one, she was a warmth in a cold place, someone you want to believe. My throat closed. "You're pale," she said. "Are you sick?" "A reporter called," I said. "She has documents that link the vendors to your holding company." Vanessa's face didn't change. She placed her hands, palms down, on the desk. Fingers splayed like a pianist ready to aim a chord exactly where it would hurt best. "Mara," she said softly, "you know the difference between fraud and structure. We use intermediaries to protect discretion when we negotiate, especially with real estate. You want us to get gouged? You want donors' dollars to be wasted because someone hears charity and adds a zero? Are the companies yours? Mine is a funny word. I have a financial interest in results, and so do you." My stomach twisted. We are paying companies that pay you. We are paying companies that help us move fast. In a city where process is a chokehold, she leaned forward, lower voice, patient, as if explaining fractions to a child. "The world is full of people who want to help until it costs them something. I have built a machine that mitigates their cowardice. If we had to raise money for every contractor, every consultant, that's not the point." "What is the point?" she asked, and her voice went briefly fierce. "That I should live like a nun? That we should make ourselves small to make small minds comfortable? You know me. You know what I have given up for this. You were there when I had nothing but a cold office and a cardboard sign." "I was there," I whispered. "That's why this hurts." On Friday morning, the article broke. They didn't call it a charity. They called it an empire. The reporter had found the shell companies, the holding companies, the way money moved like water through sluices, never touching but always nourishing the same field. There were emails, mine, Simone's, Vanessa's, ripped from context and pinned like butterflies under glass. They ran photos of children whose names I knew, faces I had edited light onto, eyes I'd framed to convey dignity, not poverty. Underneath, a headline sharp enough to open a vein. By noon, trucks with satellite dishes lined our block. Camera crews camped like weather systems. A woman shouted my name across the lobby and asked me if I felt complicit. The word zapped through me, and the glass doors slid closed between us. I couldn't feel my hands. Donors. Texted hearts, and then question marks, and then silence. Volunteers arrived angry and left angrier. Our phone tree collapsed. A board member called to say he was heartbroken and blindsided, as if he were the one who had been sleeping next to deceit. Our legal counsel told us to say nothing. Saying nothing felt like drowning in public. At 4 p.m., the board asked Vanessa to step aside. She said no. They asked again. She asked for a show of hands. It felt like a sacrament gone wrong, palms raised like a choir with its throat cut. Not in prayer, but in triage. The vote was 7-2. She stood slowly. "Let me say it plainly," she told them. So calm, so composed, it made me hate her and love her in the same breath. "I have engineered systems that have saved more lives than any of you will ever touch. If you're afraid of your names in the paper, you can wash your hands now. But don't pretend you didn't eat with them dirty." She left without theatrics. She did not slam a door. She did not cry. She brushed her fingers along the conference room wall. as if to memorize the texture of a place that had made her and then unmade her. The board named an interim director. They told the world, "We are horrified and we are cooperating fully." Reporters put microphones in my face and asked if I had known. I told them the truth, that I had not known, that I had asked questions and wanted to believe the answers. That belief is an organ that can be tricked into loving the wrong patient. Someone online found my old photos with Vanessa and wrote "traitor" beneath them. Someone else sent a DM that said, "I should have to sleep outside in winter to feel the impact." Simone sat on the floor of her office and cried for the first time since I'd met her. I sat with her, my back against the filing cabinets that held our neat lies, and cried too. People from the shelters called, voices ragged, asking if we were going to miss the next truck. "Please don't be late," a man whispered. "We can make it if you're not late." We weren't late, not that night, or the next, or the next, because chaos is cruel, but kind women keep showing up. We scavenged resources, begged rival organizations for shared lists, rerouted volunteers, bribed drivers with pizza, and the kind of promises you can only make when your heart has been broken in public and you still choose to keep loving. 3 days later, the city attorney announced an investigation. 2 weeks later, the state attorney general announced another. In the meantime, Vanessa did what Vanessa does best. She stood in front of a camera and made the world reconsider. She framed herself not as a thief, but as a visionary, punished for speed. She gave interviews to friendly outlets and posted a letter to her followers that opened with, "If this is the end of what we built, please remember the nights we made the lights come on." She used "we" until the word was a hook in my jaw. She never mentioned the dress. People believed her. Or didn't. That's the terrible mercy of a scandal. It allows everyone to perform their identity without moving any furniture. The people who needed to believe in an angel said "witch hunt." The people who needed to believe in a villain said, "I always knew." And the majority, the exhausted, said nothing because they were trying to make rent and didn't have room for our morality play in their afternoons. Someone created a list of acceptable charities to replace us. People copy-pasted it like a salve. A rival organization took over one of our shelters and put up a banner that read, "Continuity of care." And I went home and threw up. Not because they were wrong, but because they were right, and I was tired of being right, only in private. In the quiet between storms, I replayed conversations in my head the way you touch a sore tooth. When had she decided? When had the first transfer felt less like a sin and more like a solution? Had she told herself a story before we ever told one? A story where she deserved what the city took from her. The time, the tolerance, the way men looked at a woman who asked them not for permission, but for checks. Had she reached out for a dress one night, giddy and shallow, and found that there was no lightning bolt? The horror was not that she stole. The horror was that she stole slowly, and the world applauded the new clothes without asking who paid for them. I told myself stories, too. That she would apologize. That she would admit the structure was a cheat. That she would say my name in public and call me what I had been. Loyal. She did none of that. She posed with her dog. She posted older photos of children and called them memories that no headline can erase. She liked comments that said, "We betrayed her." A month in, I visited our first winter shelter on a hot June day because grief makes you crave old rooms. The gym smelled like dust and promise. The cots were stacked along the wall like folded lives. I sat in the bleachers and imagined December, the wet socks lined along radiators, the snoring orchestra, the quiet pockets where a mother read to a child under a blanket, pooled like a skirt. I still wanted that, the nearness of other people to make the world feel survivable. I wanted a reason to keep showing up. The scandal did what scandals always do. It poured kerosene on the dry places. It ignited old grievances and lit up the fault lines in our city. Suddenly, every charity was suspect and every wealthy donor a savior. Neither story was true. Both were easier than asking what allows the hunger to exist at all. On the day the state froze our accounts, while lawyers argued like electricians over switches, I took a walk along the river where we host the summer food trucks. A boy sat on a bench in a purple shirt too big for him, eating a grape ice pop, legs swinging. I recognized him. His name is Jax. He drew me once, me and Vanessa, our faces like moons, because children always make your eyes too big if they like you. He saw me and waved. I waved back, and suddenly, the longing was a physical thing. A reach across a chasm to a world that didn't yet suspect us. He came over and leaned into my side without asking. It felt like absolution. My mom says thank you for the groceries, he said, and that we're not going to watch the news anymore because it makes her sad. And that when I'm big, I should get a good job like you and help people. Get a job you love? I said, my voice strange to my own ears. Help people, even if it isn't your job. He nodded solemnly, the way kids do when they are memorizing directives to use later. Then he ran back to his mother. She lifted a hand with a smile that cost her something. I lifted mine and wondered how much any of it would matter if the truck stopped coming. The truck stopped coming. We pieced together one more month with emergency grants and donors who gave without wanting a tax letter. But a network built on an image cannot function when the image breaks. Volunteers drifted to other places because they should. Because the food is what matters. Because loyalty should never starve anyone. The staff split into two tribes. The ones who believed Vanessa had saved more than she skimmed, and the ones who believed the skimming ruined the saving. I understood both and trusted neither. We shut the office on a Thursday. The city padlocked the gym on Friday. I stood in front of the door and put my forehead against it. It was warm, familiar, tender. Buildings do hold our ghosts. Walls really do listen. Inside, the cots leaned against each other like cousins. I slipped a purple shirt into my tote. When I got home, I folded it and put it in my bottom drawer like a relic. Vanessa went live on Instagram that night. They can freeze accounts, she said into her phone, sitting cross-legged on a couch in a house I didn't recognize. But they cannot freeze our compassion. She asked people to donate to a new fund. Direct to me, she said, so I can move fast. I threw my phone across the room. It landed on the couch and kept playing. The comments filled with hearts. There are two endings to stories like this, and they both feel inevitable. In one, the villain goes to jail and we call it justice while hunger waits for the next charity. In the other, the villain rebrands as a victim and half the city agrees because it's easier than holding two truths, that she helped people and hurt them, that her hands held babies and account numbers. We rarely get the third ending, the quiet one where we sit together and ask why we make our heroes from the same flawed cloth as ourselves, and then act surprised when their seams split. The investigations dragged on. Lawyers fed statements to papers that wrote hungrily. I joined another organization, smaller, meaner, in the way real work gets when you stop taking photos of it. I wrote fewer press releases and more grant proposals with stats that would make you reconsider your faith in policy. The new director is a woman who doesn't own a dress you can't spill soup on. She is never going to be on the cover of a magazine. I am never going to write copy that tastes like champagne again. Good. Sometimes, late, I play Vanessa's old speeches and listen for the moment she began to believe herself more than the work. I can't find it. The line is too thin. Maybe it never existed. I saw her once, months later, at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She wore a white shirt the way women wear armor. Her hair was perfect. Mine was not. She saw me and smiled carefully, as if approaching a dog she wasn't sure would bite. Mara! Vanessa! We stood, like co-workers in a kitchen, standing around a cake someone forgot to cut. I read your op-ed, she said gently. You're a beautiful writer. I wish it could build a shelter, I said. It can, she said. Words build worlds. You taught me that. You taught me something else, I answered, and watched the flicker in her eyes. That brief, honest pain you can't fake no matter how fluent you are in cameras. Do you hate me? She asked. No. Do you love me? I exhaled. I loved the version of you that was willing to be small in the service of something big. She looked down. I got tired of being small. And we paid for your largeness. She nodded slowly. I wanted to build a machine that didn't need permission. I told myself I deserved to be paid for surviving what it took to build it. You deserve to be paid, I said. You didn't deserve to be worshipped. A man at the next table glanced up, curious. We stepped closer to each other the way we used to, when we were plotting. I'm sorry, she said, and I felt the words in my body like a hand on a bruise. Not for the systems, for the secrets, for not trusting you with them. I don't know if I could have saved you from yourself. You could have tried. I wanted to say I did. I wanted to say receipts and shell companies and a dead woman in Florida. Instead, I said, what will you do now? She looked at her hands. Start over somewhere else. Smaller, maybe. Or bigger. I don't know yet. Don't ask people to believe in you, I said. Ask them to believe in the work, even when you're not near it. She laughed, a small, broken thing. Words, she said again. Always words. We stood in that narrow aisle between the pastry case and the milk station, like women at the end of a road. Then I stepped aside. She stepped forward. The barista called her name as if he'd been doing it forever. I went back to my office. We were working on a winter contingency plan because winter always comes, scandals or not. The director put a hand on my shoulder and told me we had secured the old gym again. The city had given us a temporary contract. We can fit 200, she said, pride and fear braided together in her mouth. Can you write something for the website? I opened a new document and waited. Words came like water, finally remembering how to flow downhill. I wrote about heat, about doors that open, about a boy with a grape ice pop who told me his mother wasn't going to watch the news anymore. I wrote about mistakes, ours and theirs and mine, and about showing up anyway, and about how maybe goodness isn't a halo at all, but a practice. A thing you do with your hands when no one is looking, and especially when everyone is. We posted it without a photo. The donations didn't flood, they trickled, which is messy and humble and exactly how good things always begin. That night, we turned on the lights in the gym. The cots looked like hope in a landscape of polished floors. We put out a bin of socks. We set up a table with tea and broth, and the kind of cookies that crumble just right when you're hungry and suspicious. The doors opened and people came. Men with shoulders like boulders and women holding babies and teenagers trying to look bored about it. The room filled with the sound of relief so fragile you almost hate to breathe near it. A volunteer handed me a purple shirt. "We still use these?" she asked, hesitant, like the garment might be cursed. "We use everything that works," I said, and pulled it on. It smelled like laundry and a little like the past. I stood by the door and said welcome until the word ceased to be a word and became a blessing. We were almost full when Jax and his mother walked in. He grinned when he saw me and made a beeline for the tea. Then he came back and tugged my sleeve. "Is it true?" he asked in a conspirator's whisper, "that you don't work with the bad lady anymore?" I crouched until we were eye to eye. "It's true." "Good," he said. Then he ran off to pick the cot near the radiator. I watched him go, and something in my chest unclenched. The city is cruel and generous and tired. It will break you and then ask you to keep walking. But here, now, we were a room with lights and heat and socks that didn't have holes. Here, now, we were a practice and not a personality. Here, now, we were good as a verb. Later, when we turned off the last lamp, a woman I'd never seen before touched my arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for the bed." For not asking me why I needed it. I nodded, throat tight. We went outside together into a night that almost hurt. It was so clear. Across the river, the city glittered like a lie and a promise. Both. Always. Both. I walked home past the coffee shop. In the window, a woman with a white shirt sat alone, stirring a drink long after the sugar had dissolved. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Some stories do not end with a reckoning in public. They end with a practice in private. The quiet kind of freedom that never looks good on camera and doesn't care. My phone buzzed. A colleague sent a photo of the gym. Cots lined like sentences, the first paragraph in a better story. I sent back a heart. Then I slid the phone into my pocket and kept walking, hands empty, palms ready. Tomorrow, the trucks will come again. Not because we deserve them, or because we've perfected the system, but because the work is there, and we will show up. And if anyone asks what happened to the empire, I will tell them the truth. It collapsed under its own reflection. And if anyone asks what happened to me, I will tell them another truth. I'm still here, doing the thing that never needed a camera to matter. That's the part I want you to remember, not the scandal, not the headlines that taught you new words for old sins. Remember the room. Remember the heat. Remember the boy with the grape ice pop and how the world is ready to be rescued in small pieces. We cannot save it all. We can save this. The night, the light, the door that opens. Dive into stories that stir your soul. Jackie Smith. Stories is your daily haven for raw emotions, courageous women, and authentic, true-life narratives. We weave tales of hope, strength, dreams, and the quiet miracles of everyday life. Our stories inspire, uplift, and remind you you're never alone. Subscribe now to experience a fresh, heartfelt chapter every day that sparks wonder and connection. Join our community and be part of the journey.